We're here with Chris Gaul, Esports Director of Park University. He's going to add super valuable information for international students. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to provide an opportunity to some students.
And before we start talking about your esports program, can you tell us a bit about your journey, how you got to be an esports director in Point Park?
Yeah, so I actually started in esports when I was sort of in my early teenage years, about middle school in America. I was playing Call of Duty professionally at that point. I was actually offered to drop out of high school, leave high school, and go play Call of Duty professionally. I turned that down because it didn't seem like the right career path for me at the time. I went to college. I continued to play semi-pro in Overwatch, and I competed in a couple other titles, being League of Legends and Rocket League. And then after my time at college, I got more into coaching and directing and helping to gauge feasibility of collegiate esports programs. From there, I moved to Washington, D.C. and started setting up esports programs for colleges in that area. One of them being one of the largest community colleges in the nation, in America. And then I moved back to Pittsburgh, which is where I'm originally from, and have been working to set up Point Park's esports program and have been growing it ever since.
That's great. That's great. And that before this interview, we're talking about all the scholarships you give also in non-competitive positions. For students like content creation, social media,
Mm-hmm.
music design, and animation. Can you get a bit uh, into it, like why you decide to invest a lot in developing the skills of those students apart from the competitive?
Yeah, so I mean, esports is an absolutely massive field. It's a
Hmm.
field where there's a lot of money flowing around in the right places, and a huge majority of that field is run by people who aren't the players, right? There are
Hmm.
players who play on stage, and there are professionals and coaches and analysts that work for those teams, but a large majority of the field in the industry is run by people behind the scenes who are working on social media management, broadcast production, behind the scenes work for different events, event management, graphic design, video design, music production. All of this stuff is all stuff that needs to happen to help the industry run. And you're much more likely as a student to get involved in esports in that route than you are to be a professional player, right? And even if you are a professional player, you sort of need to have options when your professional career runs to an end or you decide to retire. You need to have some options in place. So a large part of my program and something that's very important to me is offering my students scholarships to be a part of that side of my program, to be a part of my social media management, my content creation, music production, broadcasting crew, all of this stuff, photography, cinematography, videography, all of this stuff that is important to the field, but doesn't necessarily always get thought of when you think of esports. I offer scholarships just like I do for my student athletes, for students who are going to be invested in that side of the program, because they're putting in a lot of effort for me and they're putting in a lot of time, and I'm giving them the skills and knowledge to sort of springboard into the esports industry when they leave college.
That's right. And does the positions you provide, like in the liberal arts, like cinematography, music, does something to do, like your like Point Park has one of the best programs in the nation in those areas, and you leverage it in your esports program?
Yeah, so our cinema, theater, conservatory, performing arts area of our school is one of the best in the nation. Dance, music, all of that stuff is are we are very, very talented at as an institution and as a university. And so it's something that one of the other reasons that I put a lot of effort and pride into that side of the program, because a lot of the students who are at Point Park are interested in that and want to sort of see that grow, and they're learning the same stuff in their classes and they're bringing it over to the program, and it's all matching up and they're getting experience doing running events and doing the stuff that they're hearing about in class and that they're working on and learning about.
That is great. That is great. And how would be like a day to day of a competitive player and also students that are working the program? Does it vary, or they have kind of the same schedules? Class, I guess, very similar, but like in practice and work schedules in the program, How does that vary?
Yeah, so it's definitely different. So our players would be looking at a more traditional, practice every day, practice every other day, games on the weekends or games during the week, whatever it may be, right? Pretty traditional, couple hours at a time. We're practicing, doing the average, sort of what you would expect from
Mhm.
a college athlete. The behind the scenes crew, the broadcast crew, they're on a much different schedule. It's going to look a lot closer to what you would expect a job to look like. So they would be coming in like a part time job. They'd be coming in once a week for a meeting with everybody. They have team leads that they sort of report to that then report to me. We have goals and objectives that we're trying to hit throughout the week. We have people that are scheduled to come to the games and cast our games and broadcast our games and run the cameras for our games, all of that stuff. So you sort of get scheduled for that. You do what you want to do, and it's very initiative based. So if you're watching maybe a tournament for a game that we don't offer at home, or you're watching a professional tournament, or you're watching League of Legends Worlds, and you're thinking to yourself, well, that's a really cool idea. And I really like how they did that with their broadcast, or I really like how they're doing that on their social media. I'm going to bring that to our team, and we're going to brainstorm ideas of how we can do this to fit what we're doing, and we can do this to make it look nice in our area. So it's a lot of initiative based. It's a lot of meetings, brainstorming. The sort of creative process can take time, but once we have goals and objectives that we set forth, it's sort of full steam ahead to make those accomplishments come true.
That's great. And with all the teams and the student positions you have, like, what are how do the facilities look like, and all the technology involved? Like, can you explain a bit? Like, because usually that's what the students are also very interested about.
Yeah, so we have a pretty state of the art esports facility. It has top of the line. We have 14 stations at the moment. I'm planning on possibly expanding more in like the 3 to 5 year plan. I have some serious expansion goals put in there, but right now we're at 14 state of the art machines. We have a pretty relatively large facility, 3 massive screens around the facility that we use for coaching purposes. We also have a little broadcast studio that's attached. So it has our soundboard, our switcher, all of our cameras run into that. We run 3 different live cameras for our broadcast streams. We have a small casting booth back there that's soundproof, so students can sort of be back there and casting on camera, and they watch the game. And we have students running our cameras out in the facility around the players. We have students running our spectator camera in game. So it's a pretty bustling facility, but it's large enough to accommodate what we need. We're also sponsored by Red Bull, so all of our students have access to free Red Bull, and there's Red Bull coolers sort of stationed around our facility. So I can send you some pictures. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, and talking about brands and stuff, like, what other sponsors or partnerships you have that benefit the students?
Yeah, so because we're like downtown Pittsburgh, right? We're right in one of the bigger cities in the United States. There are actually a lot of different connections that our school has through our School of Business, through our School of Communication. There's a lot of different connections there, and there's a lot of different opportunities for students to sort of get internships into larger companies, more well-known companies that you wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to in a school that's located in a more rural area. So we do have a lot of opportunities, especially internships, especially sort of right out of college job style opportunities that students can get into, get experience with. And our esports program is connected to all of that as well. So we sort of share those opportunities. So if students are looking to get opportunities in certain areas, the school can easily, and the esports program can easily help those students sort of get there if we have those connections.
That's right. And what is the ratio of students that go into the esports industry and those students that just go to the workforce in the major they study?
Um, That's
Approx.
a that's a difficult question because some students will end up going into an industry that they were studying and then actually going into esports after that. Some students have gone straight into esports and realized, this isn't really what I thought it would be, or not really what I want to do, or this isn't long term, so I'm going to go back. So it's a tough question. We've definitely seen students go both ways, so it really does depend on what students really like. I've had students who go into clothing manufacturing, like art and design for clothing brands, but the majority of what the company they're working with is working with esports companies designing jerseys and clothing. So they're kind of working in esports, they're working esports adjacent.
Hmm.
it's difficult to sort of paint that clear line, but we definitely can provide students the opportunity to go down the avenues that they sort of see fit for them.
That's right. And Chris, more in the academic side,
Mhm.
do you think that in Point Park, or are you working on maybe offering some academic courses in esports? I'm not saying major, but maybe like a certificate, master's, minor, or maybe implement esports into a broadcasting major or a.
Yeah. So it's something that right now I'm an adjunct professor at Point Park as well.
Okay.
I actually teach a business of esports class that goes over a
Oh yeah,
lot of,
yeah.
how money gets made, what behind the scenes looks like, all these different opportunities that aren't just what you see on TV, right?
Hmm.
So I do teach a class on that. So we have some of the curriculum sort of put in. I would like to provide a little bit more, especially tied in with the broadcast department and the communication school.
Hmm.
If it's to get a certificate in or just to get classes more heavily tied into doing, sort of internships, if you will, with me, getting students having sort of on ground credit in the facility, working with the teams that are coming from the School of Communication and the broadcast programs. So I think there are opportunities to get more curriculum based
Hmm.
interconnection there, but we already do have some, and so we're building more every year that goes by.
That's great. That's great. And for the students that are into competitive gaming, like players,
Mhm.
how is the coaching strategy? Like, do you just they just practice and play? You divide the practices. Example,
Yeah.
playing,
So
VOD reviewing. Like, what is the approach that a coach would give to their players?
yeah. So they're like right now I coach the league team as
Okay.
well as direct the program. And then I have a full-time head coach for the Valorant team. And then Rocket League is currently being coached by myself and an assistant. So each of these teams gets their own individual practice time. We have VOD review. We have one-on-one sessions and one-on-one meetings where I work with the players individually to help them sort of grow their different skill levels. All of our practices we're scrimmaging if we can against other colleges and other teams of our skill level. So it's not like these students are, oh well, you're a part of the esports program and this is the time that we practice and you just show up and play your game. It is an organized practice that your team shows up and there's nobody else that your coach is being focused on at the moment. They're working with you, they're working with your team, you're building strategies for your games coming up. It's sort of your time and your season. So it is very reminiscent of a different varsity collegiate sport. You have a coach, they work with you, they work with your team when it's your practice time. And then outside of that, they might work with the other team, right? Think about like a track coach, for example. When he's working with your squad of runners, right? He's focusing on you, but when it's cross country's turn, he's with them, right? If that makes sense.
Of course, of course. That's right. And where do you see like your program in the next 2 years? Not very far along, but like in the next 2 years, like objectives you would like to accomplish.
Yeah, big objectives that I'm sort of striving for, and we touched on one already, which is intertwining with curriculum a little bit more,
Hmm.
providing a lot more sort of connection between the curriculum at the institution and the esports program. And then my second big goal is to have full-time head coaches for all of my sports before I start adding more sports. So I hope to have a full-time Valorant and a full-time league and a full-time Rocket League coach as well. So these students have somebody who is dedicated just to their team, working with them at all hours. The touch points are at an all-time high, and these students are getting the best possible experience. I'd also like if that does come to fruition that I'm working on that expansion, I would like those full-time head coaches to also have academy teams or developmental teams that they're working with as well, so students can sort of move through the program in a more fluid fashion instead of varsity or nothing. Excuse me.
That's great. That's great. And where do you see like like the collegiate scene going in esports? Like, do you see like would you see like being an athletic department and an esports department, or like esports being part of a varsity athletic team, or in what other aspects do you think collegiate esports is going to head to in the next, let's give it 5 years, let's not make it like
Sure.
10, 20.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you hit it on the head with the first one. I do think that, and schools are already starting to do it. Some of the very successful ones are already
Mhm.
starting to do it. I think you will see a lot of schools basically putting in their own esports department adjacent to the athletic department that is working on curriculum, that is working with communication students and providing a lot of opportunities there, has their own internship programs, has their own teams with head coaches for each one, very adjacent and very similar to an athletic department. But there's a lot of things that we deal with that they don't, and that they deal with that we don't. So it makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense to have those separate. And I think a lot of schools that are really successful in sort of going gung ho are starting to see this and understand this.
Mhm.
And I only see it growing because for a school, from a school's perspective, esports is significantly cheaper to have than a traditional athletic sport. Once you have the facility, there's minimal travel. There is travel, right? And you can always go to lands and compete there, but they don't, the majority of the time you don't have to. So it's a lot
Mhm.
cheaper in that regard. You're not constantly buying new basketballs or constantly refinishing your basketball court or constantly having to mow the grass of your baseball field and stuff like this. There's a lot less maintenance. It's just a much cheaper thing for the school to run, but it provides just the same amazing experience to the students. So you can provide an even better experience to the students because you're not having to spend as much money on certain other things. So I only see it growing. I only see schools, more and more schools getting on board with it as sort of things pick up more and more through the college esports space.
That's right. And do you see like esports programs relying on the university budget, or maybe like so being a bit year by year more self-sufficient by partnerships, sponsorships, like
Yeah,
because
I think
some traditional sports are profitable for the university, but some no. How do you see an esport program going?
Yeah. So I think it depends on like the size of the school, the
Yeah.
style of the school. Some schools, like some of the much larger schools, I think you will see them start to really start to make some serious money for the school. I think it'll be a lot of years before you're matching anything like American football or
Mm.
anything like that. But I think because it's a lot easier to run, it's a lot less investment intensive. I think you'll start to see programs that can match that level of professionalism that American football has without having to make quite as much money. And I think they will start to bring in money for the school, and certain other schools will be relying on school budgeting and school funding. And I think it really depends on the type of school, but I think all avenues are open for esports at the moment. So I think you'll see it in every aspect as the sort of future progresses.
That was great, Chris. Well, thank you very much for this talk. Like, it's super valuable for students and parents. That's why I was
Mhm.
asking you these last questions. Because it's
Yeah.
more like parents ask us a lot
Mhm.
this. So, like, thank you for all your responses. Super detailed, and yeah, Chris. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah.
And also, where can people find you in your program?
Yeah. So we are on pretty much every social media. If you just type in Point Park EPPU Esports, you'll find us on all social medias. You can also find me if you just type in my name in Point Park. You'll find me, and my email will be right there. You can email me. So I'm not a hard guy to find, and our program's pretty out there. So you can, and I'm sure that you'll be tagging us in all the stuff that goes out with me. So
Yeah.
check the description or check whatever's below, and I'm sure that you can easily find us.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for your time,
Yeah.
and let's stay in touch.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.